Hey guys, welcome back to Clownfish TV. This is Kneon. I'm out here with Geeky Sparkles. We're going to talk about toys. We're going to talk about Hasbro. We're going to talk about games. We're going to talk about tariffs. Everybody's talking about tariffs. In fact, if you watch the Clownfish Gaming channel, I did a pair of videos yesterday talking about tariffs and the impact that they're going to have on the gaming industry, both video games and tabletop games. And in the short term, I'm going to be honest, it's going to be catastrophic. It's going to be catastrophic, especially for these smaller companies. But big companies like Hasbro are not immune to the pain either. And investors are very leery about, throw more money in the direction of Hasbro, Mattel, and other toy companies because they're like, hey, you guys produce most of your stuff in China, and things are going to get a lot more expensive. And guess what? People aren't going to buy toys like they were. They're not going to buy games like they were. So let's talk about this. Before we get into it any further, please subscribe for more pop culture news, views, and rants. Guys, again, Geeky sitting this video out. So yeah, my thoughts on the tariffs. I guess I'll be a little more blunt over here on Clownfish TV than I was on Clownfish Gaming. I try to keep that channel apolitical. And we try to keep this one for the most part apolitical. But I think that I understand the thought process behind it, that we want to kind of force manufacturers to come back to the U.S., but it didn't happen overnight. We didn't turn the keys to the candy store over to China overnight. And we're not going to be able to just flip a switch and start manufacturing this stuff over here within a year or two. It's not going to happen. It's going to take years to get things up and running again. I do believe long term that we need to, especially the pandemic should have been the first indicator we need to do this, but we do need to bring manufacturing back to the US, right? It's very expensive. It's very cost prohibitive to make things over here, if you can even find somebody to make certain things. And toys are one of those things that for the most part, they've historically been outsourced to China, Taiwan, Macau, all these, you look on any toy and you'll see Malaysia, all these, either, China or third world countries or whatever, because the labor's cheap. And you can't make cheap toys when you have to pay somebody $20, $25 an hour, union or whatever over here in the US. It's just not going to happen, right? So you pay slave labor basically, and they make the toys. Santa's elves at work. Did you ever see that the one skit on Mad TV with Santa's workshop? And it was basically a bunch of Chinese kids working in a sweatshop, and that's kind of what's going on. But I mean, look, that's neither here nor there. The truth is, all these toy companies, all these game manufacturers, from Hasbro down to Kickstarter level, they depend on overseas manufacturing. Hell, we do to some extent, right? And I talked about this in the other videos on the gaming channel, that we publish books and games, and it's one of the things we do. And I'm looking at this now, like we have one game in development in particular that has a lot of board game type pieces, and I'm like, well, damn, I'm not sure what we're going to do here, because now we're looking at 50-60% increase on the cost of it. But yeah, investors aren't really feeling it with Hasbro either. Now look, everything's kind of collapsing right now, but Hasbro, Mattel, and Funko got hit harder yesterday. Shares of Hasbro, Mattel, and Funko were getting crushed today as investors reacted to Trump's announcement of reciprocal tariffs last night. This is Yahoo Finance. Consumer discretionary stocks are getting hit especially hard since many of these products are imported from abroad and consumers don't need to buy them. See also video games. This is the thing people don't understand. They go on about comic books, and they go on about video games, and go on about all this media. And the truth is, we don't need any of it. I mean, it's nice to have. It really is nice to have, but comic books aren't necessary. Toys aren't necessary. Video games aren't necessary, especially when you've got so much stuff that's already out there, that's better than the new stuff being released in a lot of cases. And, when people are paying, $6, $8 for a dozen eggs or whatever the hell it is now, it's like $6. I think last time we bought eggs, when they're paying that much for eggs, they're not going to pay $75 for a board game. It's just not going to happen. I said toys are in an especially discretionary category, so it wasn't surprising to see shares of Hasbro, Mattel, and Funko all fall off a cliff. The S&P 500 finished Thursday down 4.9%, while Hasbro lost 12.3%. Mattel was down 16.6%, and Funko had given up 18%. They said, are toy stocks in trouble? They said toys are typically bought for children who don't make a lot of purchasing decisions, and there are also ample substitutions for new toys, including used toys, used games, and other forms of entertainment, like, your iPad or whatever. But that's true. I mean, even games, I talked about this too. Like, people are going to go back and buy old consoles with complete games that are on a cartridge or a disc that you don't have to have hooked up to the internet. They're going to go back and play Steam games they bought 3 years ago on sale and forgot about. Maybe it was part of a humble bundle or something. Do you really need to buy overpriced, cheap Transformers? Not really. I'm starting to wean myself off of them now because I'm like, the quality's just not there, and they get more and more expensive. They said the supply chains of all three of these companies seems vulnerable to the new round of tariffs, and the toy industry was already struggling prior to the trade war due to weak consumer spending and an extended hangover following the pandemic peak. Yeah, a lot of games were sold. A lot of board games were sold because people were stuck in their houses. They couldn't really do anything else. So they played board games and stuff. And we're never going to get back to that again. I don't think we're ever going to hit that peak again because now people have a lot more options. And these companies are going to have to work a lot harder for half as much business as they used to get. Right. That's why Hasbro is trying to pivot to be like a digital IP company, and they're just going to license out. If you've been following Hasbro, and we've been covering Hasbro a lot in this channel, that's why they're going to be licensing out, I think, a lot of their IP. They're like, let Playmates, let Basic Fun take the risk making toys. We're just going to make, we're going to make AAA video games and gambling apps. That's what they're doing. According to Hasbro's annual report, the company makes its products principally in the U.S. and Far East, including China, Vietnam, India, and Japan. Most of the company's products are made from basic raw materials like plastic, paper, and cardboard, so moving production around or bringing it to the U.S. may be easier than it is for some products like cars. Very few manufacturers are set up or equipped to make toys, game components, etc. Now, do I think that's going to change? Yeah, I think it's going to change. But God, when we did Crimson Wren Volume 1, we went with a U.S. printer, and it's hard finding a U.S. printer anymore that can do hardbound graphic novels, full color graphic novels, and do them well. And we had problems with that printer. And it wasn't the quality of the book. It was the previous owner. Long story short, the previous owner had some severe personal issues. And there was some question as to where our money went. And we did eventually get a hold of the new owner, and we're kind of like, hey, we totally paid for these books. You need to give them to us. Like now, like yesterday, dude. That was a whole cluster. And I'm not going to name the printer because apparently they've straightened things out. But what I'm saying is it's very hard. It's very hard to find a good U.S. printer. And it's very hard to find, anybody that can manufacture action figures or, again, game components and stuff like that here at a decent price. Mattel, its primary manufacturing facilities are located in Indonesia, China, Malaysia, Mexico, and Thailand. The company sources raw materials from a wide range of suppliers, meaning raw materials shouldn't be a concern, though it is likely to have to absorb or pass along the cost of the tariffs, at least in the near term. Funko is much smaller than Hasbro and Mattel, so it's the most vulnerable. Yeah, Funko's already in trouble. Funko is not in a good place right now. Funko makes most of its products in the outside the U.S., Vietnam, and China, U.S., Mexico, and Cambodia. The company also makes a majority of its sales from the U.S., and the popularity of its toys have been driven by fads, making Funko a risky stock to own even in good times. Funko is not doing well. So the health of the overall economy may be of a greater concern for these companies than the impact of tariffs. These companies do tend to sell low-priced goods, so it will be easier for consumers to absorb a higher price than would be on an expensive, durable good. Low-priced goods. Have you seen what they're charging for action figures now? $15 to $20 floor, right? I mean, it was shocking to see them try to sell $10 Star Wars action figures. and they didn't sell very well. And then they marked them down to 7. And I think they were like on clearance last time I checked. But I appreciate the effort, but like low price goods, $35 Transformers that used to be $15 just not even a decade ago. That's a low price good. $60 D&D source books. I mean, come on. Toy sector was already struggling before the tariff announcement, and weakening consumer sentiment puts the industry in a tough spot. Kids aren't buying toys, and parents aren't buying them toys because these companies, a lot of them, they've been pushing politics, especially Hasbro. Hasbro's been horrible about the politics, and they're just like, you know what? We don't need to buy you toys from Hasbro, do we? Mr. Potato Man. We don't need Mr. Potato Man. You just go play in the dirt for a while. Go get your iPad, Jimmy. Hasbro and Mattel have pursued brand licensing arrangements to leverage brands like Barbie into video entertainment, but the category leaders remain mostly dependent on toy sales. Should you invest in Hasbro? No. So this is a whole nother discussion. We can talk about the board game stuff briefly. Again, if you want a more in-depth video talking about the situation with tabletop, go out to Clownfish Gaming. But TLDR, most board games now are made by smaller companies, and most of those companies get their stuff from China. And we're hearing horror stories now about people that had Kickstarters that already paid for their stuff, and by the time it hits the ports, they're going to get hit with these tariffs. They're like 54%, and they weren't anticipating that. So it's not like, they went to the broker or whatever, and they're like, okay, it's going to cost more, whatever. I'm going to pay up front. And then I'm going to go Kickstarter, and I'm going to have to ask more for each tier. And I'm going to have my goal be higher because I know it's going to cost me more to make these things. No, it was like they already crowdfunded the game or the comic or whatever. And then they're going to get hit with these tariffs once the stuff hits the port. In some cases, not every case, but in some cases, that's what's going to happen. And a lot of these publishers, like, they don't have it. Like, they weren't expecting. So just hypothetically speaking, you spend $10,000. It's a nice round number, right? $10,000 on, books or games or whatever. And you already spent that money. You think, okay, it's already taken care of, right? I already paid my $10,000. So I just, have the stuff shipped to me or whatever. I go pick it up, whatever, from the docks. Well, then they're like, okay, now you got to pay another $5,400 to have us release it to you because you got to pay the tariff. And that scenario is playing out right now where people got projects funded and they're going to come up way short because now when they get the stuff produced, and some of these games especially take multiple years to produce. So not only do you have the postage going up, but you've got the production costs massively going up. And I've gotten some notifications from some campaigns I backed. They're like, we don't know what the hell we're going to do. Like, we asked for $25,000. Now the floor is like $45,000 just to make this shit. And we don't have it. So it's going to be catastrophic. Right. And I know people are kind of like, well, it serves you right for dealing with China. I'm like, well, what choice do people have? I mean, the thing is that we, the United States, handed all of our manufacturing to overseas companies on a silver platter. And it happened over the course of, a few decades, and it decimated. I mean, we live in the Rust Belt. We're in the Pittsburgh area, and we've seen it firsthand. I mean, you look at photos of Western PA from the 60s, 70s, 80s, and it's like a totally different country. It's like a totally different dimension. The streets are full. The houses are maintained. Nobody's driving a rusty car. Everybody's got all their teeth. I mean, it's like a totally different time, right? Because there are all kinds of manufacturing jobs. And now it's just like, I mean, you go outside of the cities in Pennsylvania, go out to the Pennsylvania wilds, and you can just, look, I've been living in Pennsylvania for a long time, but you can feel the decay, right? You go to Ohio, it's the same thing. You go in the Rust Belt. These are states that were kind of the beating heart of America, that were making a lot of our stuff. And then we just gave it to these other countries. You can't just flip a switch and turn it back on, is what I'm saying. So even if long-term the tariff situation will be beneficial for the country, it's going to take years. And in the meantime, a lot of these companies are going to collapse. And it's going to be mostly small press, small game studios. It's inevitable. So heads up, things are going to get rough. Might be a good time. If you're a toy collector, it might be a good time to maybe dip out, because I think those $35 Transformers that used to be $15 are going to be $50 Transformers here pretty damn soon. So I'm going to wrap it up. Please subscribe. We will talk later.